Hello, welcome to another IELTS writing video. In today's video, we are looking at academic task 1 and how to describe a process. We're going to be going over some specific strategies that you can use to instantly make your writing sound more academic. Today's video was inspired by an article that I read at my colleague Dominic's website. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the great contributions that Dominic has made to the online IELTS community. I encourage you to visit his site at dcielts.com, and I will place a link to the particular article that I was reading in the description of this video. You may also wish to visit my sites at ieltsielts.com and the online forum ieltsnetwork.com. For the purpose of today's video, we are going to be using this very simple and straightforward diagram of the process one takes to make a pizza. And of course, we would never see anything so simple on our true IELTS exam. Okay, now the first thing I want to do is present to you the goal for today. So here are some very academic phrasings that you can use to describe steps in a process. Okay, now before we get to talking about how to use these, I want to present to you a very, very basic description of what happens in this diagram. And then I want to go over ways that we can make this description sound more academic. So if we look at these 7 steps here, and I'll try to just shrink my diagram down a little bit so you can see both at the same time. Okay, so step 1 is, first you flatten the dough with a rolling pin. Second, you spread sauce over the surface of the dough. At this point, you add ingredients to the pizza. You then put the pizza in the oven. Next, you bake the pizza for 1 hour. Following this, let the pizza cool for around 10 minutes. Finally, you serve the pizza. So when we look at a description like this, this is obviously language that is not good to use in our IELTS. It is very personal, all of this you, very personal, and it's not written passively, so it doesn't sound particularly academic. So the first thing I want to do is demonstrate just simply converting this language into passive English. And you'll notice how the language instantly becomes much more academic. Now, for those of you that know how to write passively, the lesson is not going to stop there. So if this is a bit of a review for you, please stick around. When we finish writing these 7 sentences in passive, I'm going to show you more complex ways to link the sentences together and sound increasingly academic. So let's take this first sentence here. Firstly, you flatten the dough with a rolling pin. So if we were to write this passively, it would become, first, the dough is flattened with a rolling pin. And please also notice how I've dropped the you portion of it, so it's become less personal, which is exactly what we want in our IELTS response. Now second, you spread sauce over the surface of the dough, so this would become, second, sauce is spread over the surface of the dough. Okay, actually what I'll do is I'll make these italicized so they're a little bit easier to, and bolded so they'll be easier to recognize from the others. Okay, third, at this point you add ingredients to the pizza. So here we would have, at this point, ingredients are added to the pizza. Okay. You then put the pizza in the oven. The pizza is then put in the oven. Next, you bake the pizza for 1 hour. The pizza is next baked for 1 hour. I don't know why there's a red line here. It's nothing. Following this, let the pizza cool for around 10 minutes. Following this, the pizza is let to cool for around 10 minutes. Finally, you serve the pizza. Finally, the pizza is served. Okay, so we've put all of these sentences into passive. Now the way it reads is much more academic right away. We want to take this though to the next level. And to do that, I want to introduce these three different forms to you. Okay, so I am going to delete the non-passive sentences here. Okay, now let me take the bold off of here so it's a little bit easier to read. I'll take the italics off as well. Okay, so now let's look at some of these structures. So we have our sentences in passive. They sound more academic. Now what we want to do is to link the sentences in a way that sounds even more academic, and it also shows the process and the order that things are happening in. And we can do that by following these three structures up above. So we have before, after, or prior to, and then we add a verb plus ing, so we create a gerund out of it, and then of course after this we would add a comma. So let me give you an example of how we could use this structure. So if we take the first two here, so first the dough is flattened with a rolling pin, and second the sauce is spread over the surface of the dough. Now we could link these together using a sentence like, after flattening the dough with rolling pin, comma, sauce is spread over, sauce with the C, spread over its surface. Okay, so after flattening the dough with a rolling pin, sauce is spread over its surface. Now, if you can see the way I've linked these two together, and it just has a much deeper, much more fluent read to it, which is very nice. Now we could structure different. I mean, we could use perhaps before or prior to. So then we have to change the order a little bit. So for example, prior to spreading the sauce, the dough is flattened with the rolling pin. Okay, or of course we could change prior to before. Okay, so that's how we could use that structure. Now please note my use of a comma here, which is very important, because if that is missing, or if a full stop is put in here, it really it's a catastrophe then, because the entire thought doesn't make any sense at all, and then you start creating sentence fragments. So we don't want to do that. So be sure to include your comma. Okay, now let's go over this second structure. So once, and then whatever the subject that you're talking about is, plus a present perfect version of your verb. So for example, once the dough has been flattened with a rolling pin, comma, sauce is spread over its surface. Okay, once the dough has been flattened with a rolling pin, sauce is spread over its surface. Doesn't that sound so much more academic? Now we're using passive language, we're linking our passive phrases together, and this is really starting to sound, we are really starting to sound like real expert users of the language. Now let's look at this final structure here. So having plus our past participle. So we could write having flattened the dough with a rolling pin, comma, sauce is spread over its surface. Okay? So here's another very academic way to link these two ideas together. So, you know, now we could go on through each of these sentences and do the same. So I'll just show you very quickly a couple of examples. So at this point, ingredients are added to the pizza. The pizza is then put in the oven. Okay, I'll just try to get our image to an area where we can kind of look at it as we're typing here. I might have to shrink my window a little bit. Okay, so at this point, ingredients are added to the pizza. So after adding ingredients to the pizza, it is put in the oven. Okay, or I could say, so having added ingredients to the pizza, it is put in the oven. Okay, so just different ways that we can structure these things together. So I think you get the basic idea, and then, you know, we come to our last couple here. So the pizza is next baked for an hour. Following this, the pizza is let to cool for around 10 minutes. And just real quickly, I could just show you. I mean, we could do one, for example. So once the pizza has baked for 1 hour, it is let to cool for around 10 minutes. Okay, so different ways that you can couple these ideas together. So now I wanted to just touch on one thing, because although this sort of language is very good, some students make the mistake of writing every sentence using this sort of language. And let me show you what happens when you do that. So here I've put together these sentences, and now look at how this reads. Having flattened the dough with a rolling pin, sauce is spread over its surface. Prior to putting the pizza in the oven, ingredients are added. Once the pizza has baked for 1 hour, it is let to cool for around 10 minutes. Now, what happens when we don't vary our language, when we keep using these sorts of forms one after the other, is you start to sound very robotic. You know, it's always this and this, and then this and this, this and this, and then this and this. It's a very robotic sound to the way to the piece. It lacks a certain fluency, so it's not really reading naturally. It sounds, I mean, you can almost tell that the writer has sort of applied these pre-formulated, you know, sentence structures, and it just doesn't read fluently at all. And it sounds overly complex. We don't want that. I mean, it should still sound, it should still read very fluently as we go through it. So what I wanted to do was to show how we can sort of vary our language. We can use those simple passive sentences that we created at the beginning of this lesson, and we can couple them with these more complex sentence forms, and it really creates a very nice progression through what we're describing. So let's write one of these together. Now maybe I'll get this on a new page. Okay, now please notice how I'm varying my language. I'm going from just a passive sentence to a more complex passive sentence, and then back to another passive sentence. So it's sort of varying the sentence forms a little bit for the purpose of creating fluency. So we could write something like, I'll take italics off. First, comma, the dough is flattened with a rolling pin. Okay, very simple passive sentence. Once sauce has been spread over the flattened dough, ingredients are added. Okay, going to more complex form, let's go back to a simpler form. The pizza is then put in the oven. After baking for 1 hour, the pizza is let to cool for around 10 minutes. Okay, and then maybe just a closing little, so finally the pizza is served. Now let's read this. First, the dough is flattened with a rolling pin. Once the sauce has been spread over the flattened dough, ingredients are added. The pizza is then put in the oven. After baking for 1 hour, the pizza is let to cool for around 10 minutes. Finally, the pizza is served. So I think you can see that in varying our language between a more complex structure and a less complex structure, we're able to create a certain fluency. And of course, this is something that your examiner will recognize when they read your task 1 response. So I hope that video helped clarify a few things, and I hope that you will, if you are a person that's writing these very simple sentences like we started at the beginning of the video, you'll make the effort to try to push yourself to write passively and push yourself to experiment with these more complex sentence structures. Thanks for watching and have a nice evening.